take this opportunity to greet everybody, say good evening and good morning, depending on where in the world you are, and request you all to put yourselves on mute as we will be starting. We have started the session actually right now. I am really pleased to be here, and it is my great honor to introduce to you Mr. Scott Teitsworth, who is a lifelong student of Indian philosophy and modern science under the tutelage of Nitya Chaitanya Yati, himself a disciple of Narayana Guru. An editor of books written by these gurus, he and his wife, Deborah Buckman, who is also a disciple of Guru Nitya, host the Portland branch of the Narayana Gurukula, where they have taught classes on the Bhagavad Gita and Indian philosophy since the 1970s. He lives in Portland, Oregon. On that note, I will request Dr. Jija Hari Singh, who initially conceived of these lectures, to come and say a few words about the series. Over to you.
Om Sri Narayana Paramagurve Namaha. My dear friends, my personal welcome once again to our 23rd event, the third interactive session of our third season of Guru Anugraham lectures. These are a series of events in English for a national and international audience, as it is today. Interacting with the scholarly Dr. Sabu are invited iconic personalities in this series who have experienced Sri Narayana Guru in a very special manner, in close association with Guru's lineage, giving us the out of the ordinary perception of the spirituality and the universality of Guru once every month. Today's guest, Scott Teitsworth, was drawn to Guru's revolutionary confection of modern science and ancient wisdom, focused on real life issues, to quote his own words. He and Deborah, as Yumna has already said, also host a weekly class on mystical philosophy and liberation psychology in alignment with modern scientific understandings. We are really fortunate to have him with us today. Let's listen to another aha perspective today. I hasten to add that, Scott, this is no group of just novices. This is a group of what we call jnanis and jnasus. You can just start off with the preliminaries and can totally segue into the highest philosophy. No fears. We all will understand. Everybody will understand as much as we know from the perspective of what we know. So please go ahead. Don't hold back at all. Thank you very much for being with us, Scott. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm eager to meet you all in that level. And I also teach online classes on the Bhagavad Gita, as some of you know. I have some people here who have been in the class and so on. So pretty much teaching at my slow pace, full time. Very exciting. Small groups of very dedicated people who are really interested in what this means. And my particular focus was always, what does this amazing philosophy mean to me as an ordinary person? What is the impact? What am I to do with it? And that was my slice of it. So I'm not a great philosopher or a knowledgeable academic on anything, but I highly appreciate the value of yoga philosophy as passed on, and Vedanta as passed on by Narayana Guru to us, and how that can alter your life in a very positive way. So
I think Dr. Sabu is waiting to draw out
I can see
the essence of you. Dr. Sabu?
Yes. Thank you. Namaste. So Scott Teitsworth is known as Scott Annan in Gurukula circles. So, so I be conversing with Scott Anand, not Scott Teitsworth. He is known as Scott Anand in close circles. So for a serious student of Narayana Guru's teaching, all his works are very important, equally important. Guru's conversations are important. Guru's messages are important. All these are important. Guru's works are important from the philosophical and literary point of view, and Guru's conversations and messages are important from the application side. In each conversation, we can find the applications of Guru's philosophy to a particular issue of life. It may be individual life or collective life, even in messages, may be related to the local caste issues or the larger issues of related to religion of national level. It may be psychological issues. Even we can see how Guru's philosophy is applied in labor disputes. And there is at least one conversation where I have seen how Guru's philosophy can be applied in land reforms. So these are all variety of subjects we come across in the conversations and messages of Guru. So all these works are important. But I must say that at least there are two works which should be considered as more important than the other works. In Malayalam, it is Atmopadesh Shatakam, and among the Sanskrit works, it is Darsana Mala. So these two works stand out, something different from the ordinary works, more important than the other works. And in the Gurukula tradition, all the gurus has written commentaries for both Atmopadesh Shatakam and Darsana Mala in English. Narayana Guru has commentary on Darsana Mala and Atmopadesh Shatakam. Guru Nitya has more than one commentary in English on Atmopadesh Shatakam. Guru Muni Narayana Prasad also has written English commentaries. And for Guru Nitya's commentaries on Darsana Mala and Atmopadesh Shatakam, our dear Scott Anand has written the introduction for both Darsana Mala as well as Atmopadesh Shatakam. There is another commentary of Guru Nitya on Atmopadesh Shatakam, where the introduction was written by Edda Walker, another disciple of Guru Nitya. But the main commentary of Atmopadesh Shatakam, that alone, the core of wisdom, the introduction is by our Scott Anand. And the psychology of Darsana Mala, which is exploring the psychological aspects of Darsana Mala by Guru Nitya, the psychology of Darsana Mala. For that work also, the introduction is by our dear guest today. So today our focus will be on psychology of Darsana Mala, the introduction to psychology of Darsana Mala. There's been a very interesting relationship between the Narayana Guru, Guru Nitya, disciple Guru relationship and the introductions. The first English work probably on Narayana Guru was written by Narayana Guru when he was in France, published from Geneva in Sufi Quarterly. And later it was published as The Word of the Guru. In the introduction is written by actually a Scot, not by name but by nationality. John Spears wrote the introduction. So he is a Scottish by origin. So there is a Scot. And here we have another Scot by name who has written the. So both the gurus, both Narayana Guru and Guru Nitya had Scots, either by their nativity or by their name, both are written. So we will come to the introduction by our dear guest, the psychology of Darsana Mala. I have a very important psychological point in my mind. I will ask it later. A conversation between Narayana Guru and Guru Nitya. I will come to that later. So I think we can begin with, your experiences, Scott, and your experiences and the transformations that you have experienced while going through this work, Darsana Mala. And from my side, there is a personal choice for choosing psychology of Darsana Mala. I have been working on its Malayalam translation for nearly a decade. That's why I chose it personally and the other, that alone, the core of wisdom. which is the commentary of Atmopadesha Sadaka. So I think we will begin by narrating the experience, the transformations, and all the feelings that we had while undergoing the processing the psychology of Darsana Mala in the introduction, etc. So please, I request Scott Anand to begin with that experience. Then we will pass into 1 or 2 points on psychology. Thank you.
It will be a pleasure. First of all, I'm glad you mentioned Atmopadesha Satakam as well as Darsana Mala, because I believe those two are modern Upanishads, and they deserve to be placed with Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, and Mandukya, all the great ancient Upanishads. These two are modern Upanishads of the highest caliber and tremendously pregnant with wisdom and meaning. So I am delighted to speak a little bit about one of those. After a few years of being a disciple of Guru Nitya, I realized he was giving me a vast amount, and I should start giving something back, because the score was 99.9 to 0.1 in terms of giving something to the other person. It was all coming to me and nothing was going back. And you probably know that feeling, that so much wisdom is embodied by a person that you feel as small as an ant. But I realized I should do something. And what Nitya saw in me was a competent editor. I didn't think of myself that way at all, but he discerned that and started giving me projects. The first major one, he handed me a typescript hardbound book with his first edition of Darsana Mala that he had passed to 4 or 5 other people who had all scribbled their interpretations of it, and it looked like a modern art piece. It was just completely obscured with people's scribblings and so on. And I was supposed to pull the book out of that. You know, the introduction is the very last part of a book, interestingly. It comes at the beginning, but you do it at the end. But I spent several years decoding this book and finding that the original was actually better than most of the comments and the corrections that people had put over it. But teasing out the intent of Nietzsche's psychology of Darsana Mala and restoring it and putting it together. And, you know, the belief is that every word from the Guru is perfect. So you have to be very, you're not allowed to change anything, basically. You take it as it is. But the time editing this book and realizing that in order to properly edit a book of philosophy, you had to understand what the intent of the author was. I think that was part of what the earlier faults were, that people, you know, it's difficult stuff. And people didn't understand what Nietzsche was writing about or that Narayana Guru was talking about. So their corrections were inadequate. So I would sometimes spend a week pondering a sentence or two or a paragraph, trying to think what exactly was meant. What did Nietzsche mean here? And not until the little light went off, oh, that's it. And then often, only by changing 1 or 2 words, I was able to make it read the way it was intended to be conveyed. So I didn't do the introduction until this long process of really sinking into the meaning of the work had taken place. And frankly, I felt like I was giving birth when I did the introduction. Nitya asked for it like a year ahead of, kept, all of these ideas kept mulling around in my brain, but I couldn't write. I had never written a major work before, and it just, all of this huge amount of input was there, and I couldn't get it out. And then when it came down to the wire, I really felt like I had this baby inside that needed to be born. And my family went away on vacation for a week, and I stayed home and sat in the garden, and it all poured out. And actually, the introduction is, I'm still proud of it. It's a little antique. The India that it was written about is long gone, and so far in the past, it seems like I must be 500 years old or something. But despite that, it's a really wonderful exposition of what the book, the structure of the book, and why and how and what it means. So give it a look. You can read it on my website, which should be linked here somewhere. It was also included everything Nitya told me about the production of the book. So it has the history of how it came to be, and so on and so forth. Since the book was published in 1987, our class here in Portland has gone through it 3 times. And after Nitya's passing in 1999, shortly after, I started keeping notes of our classes. And on my website also are the 2 that happened after, in this century, detailed class notes of our class really thinking about the practical implications and the meaning of every verse. So if anyone were to get really excited by this work, there's elaborations, a lot of elaborations. I just went back and looked at some from 2008 and was extremely pleased to see how much it adds to the work. It's really good stuff. It's obscure. I don't know if anybody ever reads this, but anyway, there's this huge literature about the psychology of Darsana Mala and Darsana Mala in English available to anyone who wants it. So I guess that was my part in it. And every time you read something like this, you get more out of it too. So I've been doing that for 40 plus years and still am thrilled by it. The greatest compliment I've gotten for my editing skills was I went to a music festival in Uti that needed to put on with a friend in 1989, and some fellow came up to me and said, "You're a criminal, you're a crook." And I said, "Oh, what's the deal?" He said, "Guru Nitya wrote the introduction to Darsana Mala, and you signed your name to it." And I thought, well, that is the best compliment. I've been writing in Nitya's voice for my whole life, kind of. And to that person, it sounded just like Nitya. And I thought, well, if I can sound like Nitya, even after a major effort, I'm proud of that. So I didn't take offense. I treated it as a compliment. So that's the background that I have. And, read the introduction if you can. That's my advice. If you do, you'll read the book. That's the idea. So Dr. Sabu had a second question for me. Do you want to ask it or read out the part that brings that up?
This is the background of the question. It all happened in 1958. Guru Nitya was doing his PhD at Bombay University in psychology department. He was about to submit his PhD thesis. The thesis was completed. But that particular time, his guide went, he went for some other job or some other university. And due to the internal politics of the department, which is usually in almost all universities, he could not submit the thesis. So he was in a very fuming catch-22 situation. This is the background. And the head of the department was not allowing him to submit the PhD thesis. Thesis was already ready, but he was not allowing to submit it. Now the rest I will read out from Scott Annan's introduction. While Nitya was pondering and fuming over his catch-22, his spiritual teacher, Narayana Guru, came to visit him. In his inimitable style, rather than give sympathy, he upbraided the disciple. This is a sentence to understand Narayana Guru also, his style of function. In such a fuming situation, instead of consoling him, he scolded him. And the reason for scolding, that is the interesting point. You have gotten all your information from American textbooks. He said, in 10 years, you will renounce all this borrowed knowledge. This was his comment. You have gotten all your information from American textbooks. He said, in 10 years, you will renounce all this borrowed knowledge. And the rest is, it was almost exactly 10 years later that Nitya, without his doctorate and now a guru, perceiving many of the flaws of Western psychological technique, began formulating the psychology of Darsana Mala, almost the time stipulated by Narayana Guru. So my question to Scott Annan is, what is the basic difference between what Narayana Guru described as the borrowed knowledge from American textbooks and the insights of Narayana Guru as given in Darsana Mala? So what prompted Narayana Guru to make that comment?
First of all, he said American textbooks, but what really was meant is Western, European textbooks. Small point. Nietzsche was fond of some American philosophers, but most of them were still European. Anyway, the idea being that academic information is superficial in some sense, that it's what you have taken in, but it's not completely yours yet. And by processing it, it can become that. But certainly something more like Darsana Mala or the teachings of Narayana Guru in some form can do so much more in terms of processing the arrival of wisdom, shall we say. So, Nietzsche was young enough. In 1958, he would have been 34 or 33. He was full of ideas, and he was obviously a brilliant person, but he's taking in all of these ideas and then trying to match those ideas to the world as he experienced it. And that's as academic people, academically trained people, which most of us are, that is an impediment in some ways. It closes off the inner expanse of what's now being thought of as the right hemisphere of the brain, as opposed to the left. Left hemisphere is language and conceptualization and manipulation, and the right hemisphere is where the center of our beingness and our direct contact with the world. So wisdom is direct contact or relation, and academic wisdom is interpreted or analogical thinking. Both of them very valuable, but without the centering in our being, in our wisdom connection to everything, it lacks, lacks the value that it could have. And I think that's what Narayana Guru was getting across to Nitya, that, okay, great, you've done all this work, whatever you've gotten out of it is there. If you publish the thesis, you might get some satisfaction in your ego or something like that, but none of that's really valuable. What you need to now do is find the core of yourself and where that meaning it resides. And of course, Nitya definitely did that. And, as we all know, university libraries are full of theses, wonderful theses that everybody has done and nobody has ever read. They're all saved for some, as though at some point they will emerge as valuable. But no, it's just a stage, just a training. So that's what it is. And fortunately, Nitya did do that processing. And, I think on a small level, I did too. I remember, taking in as much as I could from Nitya for about 25 years. Somewhere around 1995 or 96, I was walking down the street and I felt the tide change. That all of the stuff that had been going into me turned around and started going out. And I wasn't talking to anybody or teaching a class or anything. It just happened and it felt amazing. It was like a transformation. And not long after that, I started taking on the role of a teacher myself. So I don't know if it would ever be so obvious and dramatic for most people, but something like that, the internalization of the knowledge and converting it to wisdom has to happen. And Nitya did it beautifully. So I think that's enough. And there's one more interesting question that Sabu had for me.
Now, this is based on how we live the philosophy. As John Spears in his introduction to Narayana Guru's commentary, he said, Narayana Guru was not a philosopher not a professor of philosophy, but he was a philosopher. He lived his philosophy. And about you also, the Hindu news appears that an American who lives and breathes Indian philosophy. So pertaining to that point, I have a specific question about a specific parts of Darsana Mala. I think before that, I must give a brief idea about the different chapters of Darsana Mala for those who are not well versed in Darsana Mala. So this is a work which consists of 10 chapters, Darsana Mala. The first chapter is Adhyarabha Darshanam, that is cosmic projection. Second, Abhavada Darshanam, truth by consistent refutation of the false. Asatya Darshanam, a vision of non-existence. Maya Darshanam, a vision of non-being beingness. Bhana Darshanam, a vision of awareness. Karma Darshanam, cosmo-psychological functionalism. Jnana Darshanam, consciousness and its modifications. Bhakti Darshanam, contemplative devotion. Yoga Darshanam, transpersonal union. And the final chapter is Nirvana Darshanam, the final. So usually the conclusions of a work will be given in the last words of any work. But in Darsana Mala, it is not in the last words, it is in the fifth words of the last chapter, Nirvana Darshanam. This is something related with the basic aspects of Narayana Guru's philosophy. He is not teaching us to run away from life or not to take life as an illusion, but to take every interest of life, every aspiration of life in its relevant place. In that sense, Narayana Guru revalued the ancient wisdom, not to run away from life, to face life boldly. That was Guru's concept of revaluing the ancient wisdom. So in that connection, one verse, that is verse 5 of chapter 10, Nirvana Darshanam, the final is, the Sanskrit term says, Teitsworth jnanagnina sarvam uddishya jagadam hidam karodi vidivat karma brahmavit brahmani sthidaha. This is the verse. The English translation is, having burned everything with the fire of wisdom, aiming the good of the world, doing action according to injunction, the knower of Brahman remains firm in Brahman. The knower of Brahman remains firm in Brahman after knowing the wisdom. So please comment on that verse, how we apply that philosophy in our daily life after attaining the philosophical insights, please.
I would be delighted to. And I've got a couple of short readings to go with this. The first one really applies more to the previous question, but I think it overlaps this. From Narayana Guru's Gita, his comment on 646 includes this. Mere tapas, austerity, as it is known in the field of Indian spirituality, is a severe form of joyless self-discipline. The jnani is a wise man who might at best belong to the Samkhya, rationalist, or Nyaya, logical, philosophical schools, whose life is based on reasoning, which generally ends up with sophistications and academic discussions, by themselves dry as dust. Likewise, the ritualist tends to become ego-centered and harshly exclusive. Yoga, generally understood, is both a way of thinking and a way of life. The yogi is a dialectician who harmonizes old in terms of new and vice versa, and is capable of giving fresh life to arguments that otherwise would be dead or stale. The breeze of a fresh life enlivens the ways of a yogi. That's the verse where Krishna tells Arjuna to become a yogi. So, and in concert with that, I have another reading that from Narayana Guru that, you know, when you're working on a project, I'm sure you've all found this, bits and pieces that are relevant and helpful and need to be part of your project just appear like magic. And I've found that all along in all of my work. Reading back through it, I wonder, where did that come from? How did I know that? You know, I read it somewhere, or it just arrived. And Nitya explained that by saying that our inner guide in ourselves is arranging the world to foster our development and foster our progress. I found that to be true. It seems, you know, totally unscientific and ridiculous and unbelievable. But when you realize that what we see, everything we perceive is a construct of our own brain, then it becomes more plausible that that conceptualization that is being produced every microsecond by our own brains is going to include, you know, a pathway or a way forward, and stimulate and respond and resonate to our interests. So this, in the introduction, Nitya didn't outright give this to me, but he might have, but somewhere I stumbled across it. It totally speaks to this very verse and the meaning of it as Narayana Guru experienced it. And that is, it's the same as the Buddhist idea of the bodhisattva, that you never totally just melt into the absolute or into nirvana. You stick around and you help other people first. You know, that's only fair. You got a lot of help to get where you are, and then you should pass that on. And that's what that fifth verse in the Nirvana Darshana is. You know, it would be so nice to just melt into this total void of bliss and amazement. But it's a good time to take care of people in need. So, but this says it in Narayana Guru's terms. It's a free translation by Nitya of verses 11 and 12 of his Subramanya Kirtanam. Just a short section, but you know, imagine you're sitting at Narayana Guru's feet when you hear this. All discernible forms disappear where light is not paired with shadows, and all imaginations cease where beatitude reigns supreme. Such is the resplendence of your supreme state. It is as if your brilliance has swallowed the sun and the moon. Your lotus feet rest in the brilliant fire of the wisdom of the third eye. O Lord, reposed on the colorful wings of the phenomenal peacock, my supplication to you is not to disappear. The moon has gone beyond the horizon. With it also have gone the fantasizing dreams of the night. The sun has risen in the firmament. The moon and the shimmering stars are no more to be seen. It is a good time to immerse deeply in the depth of beatitude. Alas, that does not befit the occasion. It is not the time to be lost in spiritual absorption. Look, here is the world drowning in the dark ocean of misery. In body and mind, millions are diseased. By drinking, they have increased their torpor. These unfortunate wretches are to be roused from their drunken madness. O ye people, wake up now. It is time for you to enter into the cleansing river of eternal wisdom and perennial joy. And I think we have plenty of examples of drunken madness in our time if you are following politics, especially Indian and American politics, or, you know, the insanity that's possible and unleashed by social media and so on is off the charts, horrible. So we still are in this circumstance of, we'd like to retreat into a state of repose, and yet we are the very people who can do something about it by sharing wisdom or by sharing our compassion. And Narayana Guru is absolutely the best example, because he never set out to say, I'm going to go fix this, or I'm going to do this. He just was present everywhere. And his attitude of, you know, that's the opposite of drunken madness, whatever you might say, affected everyone, so it energized everyone to do amazing things and change their lives and so on and so forth. So that's the energy that's epitomized in this beautiful verse.
I shall recite that verse in Malayalam, that verse 12 of Subramanya Kirtanam. Spashtam nilavannu neengi, dinagaran udayam cheyidu chandran maranju, തട്ടി പെരുക്കി പെരുവെളിയതിലാക്കിടുവാൻ പിന്നെയാട്ടെ കഷ്ടം ദീനം പിടിച്ചോ മധുരയതു കുടിച്ചോ കിടക്കുന്ന ലോകർക്ക് ഉത്തിഷ്ടോത്തിഷ്ട ശീക്രം നദിയിൽ മുഴുകുവാൻ കാലമായി വന്നിതിപ്പോൾ. So now Dilip sir,
Thank you. That's
handing over the
wonderful.
platform. Thank you, Scott Undan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sabu and Dr. Mr. Scott for this wonderful session. Now the forum is open for questions. We have a lot of distinguished guests from all around the world, from East and West, especially from US and UK and from India. So you can ask your questions to both Mr. Scott and Dr. Sabu on the topic we have discussed, that is psychology of Darsana Mala, or any related topic to the same. Thank you. So there is a silence. I know Darsana Mala is a magnum opus of Narayana Guru in Sanskrit language. Of course, Atmopadeshadakam is in Malayalam. And Narayana Guru has written the integrated science of the absolute, again based on Darsana Mala. So it is not an easy work. So naturally there will be very, very limited maybe areas we could, a normal student can ask after hearing maybe a half an hour lecture.
Say one quick thing about that we have a website for Nitya now. And I did a several year editing on the integrated science of the absolute, which was not used in the latest edition, but there's a very good introduction that I put together out of Nietzsche's writing for that, which is very helpful. But I also took out the highlights because I know nobody's going to read. The book is really dense and very difficult.
Yeah.
Integrated science of the absolute. But on Nietzsche's website, you can find highlights, and they're brilliant. I mean, Narayana Guru at his best was mind-blowing.
Thanks. We'll definitely go through it.
So if you can't go through that huge book, and I don't necessarily even recommend it, it's written for mid-century scientists of the last century, and it doesn't work for moderns very well. But the highlights are great, so check them out on Nietzsche's website. So, okay, and there was a question from the floor.
I'm very happy to hear your very valuable words about the Darshana Mala and Nirvana Darshana and Subramanya Kirtana and all these things. But I'm not asking a question. I would like to know from your perspective, you are teaching Bhagavad Gita regularly. I would like to ask you, do you find any similarity between Bhagavad Gita and Atmopadesha Shadaka? There are many similarities. I'd like to hear from you. What is the most important similarity between Bhagavad Gita and Atmopadesha Shadaka?
Oh my gosh, well, that's a tough question. I want to ask you, when are you going to give a lecture that I can attend here? Because I would love to. Anyway, you are a great friend to meet in Varkala. I'm happy you're here. But I can't answer that. You know, Narayana Guru, for some reason, was not fond of the Gita. And it was Narayana Guru who went, wow, this is amazing. And if we change it around, look how brilliant and relevant it is. It doesn't have to be what he called Lordism. You know, it's not so much a worshipful work as a work of psychology. So yeah, obviously there's plenty that's similar, but I don't see how I could possibly do that. But you know, the Gita was what Nitya first taught here, and what blew our minds. You know, we knew that it existed, but then suddenly this fellow was showing how relevant it was to us young hotheads in 1970 in America. It was just his classes were amazing. And so I've, I figure that's the cream of the cream. Might as well keep doing that. And the really wonderful thing is most of the people who are really excited about my classes are Indians who have known the Gita their whole life and found it kind of not very interesting because of the ways it's misinterpreted or variously interpreted. I guess you can interpret scripture any way you want, but the popular versions are not appealing. But when you get down to what Nitya and Narayana Guru showed it could be, people are really excited, and it's quite fun. It seems to be one of them is even in this class here, but it is so gratifying to reconnect Indians with one of their great treasures, and away they go. So I'm sorry, if you give me a month, I could look into it. But I think the wonderful thing about Atmopadesha Satakam and Darsana Mala is they are so unique. They're completely unlike anything else. And of course, wisdom is the same in various places, but
Yes,
he came up with absolute gems that are unmatched by anything. And so that's what I would say. Don't try to compare it works with anything else, but they're incomparable.
Right now, all of us are worried about the COVID-19 pandemic catastrophe. And we are discussing about Darsana Mala and also sometimes the Western philosophy. In which way we can be optimistic about we get out of this situation? And what is your opinion on that? That is my question.
No, that's a very good question. Well, I have to say, it's colossally depressing that all of this is happening and it's being dealt with so incompetently. And I think there's a level of despair on the planet that's possibly even worse than most times. Humans seem to get into these disastrous things, and this really could be the end of the world, which nobody predicted in any scripture or any great work. But to me, giving into despair is definitely not a solution to anything. And acknowledging what causes the despair and dealing with it and facing it are indeed essential to regaining or maintaining our sanity, basically. And that connects very well with Nirvana Darshana verse 5 also, that, hey, we could just sort of get out on a hammock and stare at the sky, but the world is falling apart all around us. So what the hell? We gotta cope with that. And if nothing else, it's gonna spoil our rest on our hammock there. So one of the things that is most helpful to me is to hold together with people like in this group who are like-minded, intelligent, concerned, compassionate people, to remind ourselves that, there's the human species is unbelievably amazing. And we don't want it to die out, and we don't want to kill the planet that it grew on. We want to preserve this. And it one thing I love about the Gita and also Narayana Guru's philosophy is that it's activist. It's not about going away and ignoring everything. It's about being dynamically involved. And the more you learn about balance and yoga as a dialectic and all of those things, the more effective you are at having an impact. One of the other factors is there are 10 million or more very well-meaning groups around the world doing really good things. So we don't have to fix everything. Just take care of your immediate surroundings and relate on that level, and tune out this global despair and this build up to yet another disastrous war or whatever, internet war and the pandemic. In America, we have lots of people who don't believe in getting vaccinated, and they're going to be incubating even worse strains of the virus. So we're all waiting for that. It's already happening here. So, I'm not one of those who says, well, just let God sort it out. But, in some senses, I think that Mother Nature has gotten fed up with us as a species and says, okay, you didn't take care of your stuff. I'll show you how to do it. And that was a bad choice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We can have 2 more questions.
Yeah, I can stay past the time. So.
I'm going to just say a quick one, Scott. Nice to see you, Scott.
Hello.
It's especially an honor to be present here today, because we're not just hearing one expert interview another. We know Dr. Sabu has just completed talks on the psychology of Darsana Mala in the last year. And also, we know Scott's written a wonderful commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. And that was the basis of my question. Just some background on that, because we could ask, now the Raja Guru has written a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Guru Nitya has, and so has Guru Nitya Chaitanya. So what does Scott have to offer? Well, I've found Scott has reevaluated it, updated it, and simplified it, making it even more accessible for the 21st century. So what inspired you, Scott?
I have written Why I Bother. There's an article on my in my articles page, or actually I think I have a Gita page on my website. So if you really want an answer, you can read Why I Bother, because it does seem pretty ridiculous that I would bother with all of these other wonderful commentaries. But the short version is when I started writing my commentary, which took 10 years, I realized I should read other commentaries other than Nitya's and Narayana Guru's and find out what everybody was thinking about it and what the general tenor was. And I was pretty horrified. So I can't go into details, but it energized. And that's for Suresh, I should have said that too. Disasters are what make humans rise to their best. We're not trying to have a perfect world with no conflict. Actually, the conflict and stress drives us to the heights. And so my Gita commentary came out of dissatisfaction with the junk that's passed off as intelligent commentary on the Gita. I thought it was insulting to a work that here we are. And I consider the Gita like a perfect template for teaching teachers, teaching gurus. It's really not so much for disciples. Disciples need help with that book, but it is like a guru template. And so, it makes it really easy to teach in that sense. I don't have to organize my thoughts. Somebody 3,000 years ago already did that work and did it very well. So I'm just coasting along on the old rishis. So as I was saying, it was a real honor to be here, and I wish I could visit personally with all of my. Stay safe and stay interested and care for this poor old planet with broken hearts and broken dreams, and show what big hearts and big dreams are all about. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for your kind words. So I'll come to my responsibility of thanking everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Scott and Dr. Sabu for making this conversation so lively and meaningful. And next, I would like to thank all the participants, invitees, our regular members, to make it a point to attend this session from different time zones. Thank you so much. And come to our internal team, I would like to thank our leader, Dr. Jija Madhavan Hari Singh. Without her leadership, nothing would have happened. So we are thankful to you, madam, for leading us and making this group so wonderful and meaningful. And our internal team, Ms. Yumna, Dr. Pradeep, Mr. Venu Ravindran, Mr. Anup Haridas, KC Haridasan, all these people who worked behind the scene to make this event possible. Thank you all, and thank you everyone, and good night in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dr. Sabu. It has been
Thank you, ma'am.
really a wonderful session. I wish we had an hour more stretched before us to discuss further. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who attended. And thank you, the people who have Sugita, Sanal, and the others who had asked questions. Thank you very much.